Welcome to One Simple Recipe, where we hope to get you one step closer to better health. Hi, I'm Judy Matusky, and I'm a registered and licensed dietitian, as well as a culinary nutritionist with Athens Nutrition. And today it's all about muffins. I like to spend a few minutes talking about muffins because I think muffins sometimes can be kind of just a glorified cupcake, as we all kind of know. It's often full of sugar, full of fat, not always the healthiest option, more of a dessert than maybe a meal or a nice snack. So I'm just bringing you a couple of muffins this month that are easy, fast. You can make them ahead, freeze them, and then enjoy them all summer long. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. This is a 1-bowl fruit and oat muffin. So it has obviously oats in it, and I went ahead because the first step is to take rolled oats, 5-minute cooking oats, and you're going to boil some water, and then you're going to let the water and the oats sort of sit so that the oats can kind of absorb that water for about 15 minutes. So I already did that. It's a cup of oats and just a little less than a cup of water. We'll talk about why the portion of water or the amount of water might vary a little bit. So that's already in my bowl. Now we're just going to add all of the wet ingredients, and we're going to use a half a cup of unsweetened applesauce. So just this, just a jar of applesauce. Or if you happen to have the little cups, the snack size cups of applesauce, that would work really well too. So all wet ingredients are going in. Then we're going to do just a third of a cup of just vegetable oil. This is canola oil. This recipe you could do, olive oil as well. I don't mind olive oil in my baked goods. I don't even really taste the olive flavor, and since that's always an oil that I have around, that's a good one to use. But sometimes in baking, I just go ahead and use the canola oil. And then we're going to do, for the sweetener, it's maple syrup. So we're going to add half a cup of maple syrup instead of brown sugar. And this, again, gives it a little bit of a maple flavor, but also I think it just, brings a little more moisture to the muffin to keep it from getting, overly dry. All right, and then we're adding a teaspoon of vanilla. And this really is these are our wet ingredients. So we don't have to do the separate wet in one bowl, dry in another, which is kind of nice. We're just doing it all in one bowl. And the nice thing about this is that when you're creating a muffin that, sort of the anatomy of what's like an anatomy of like a healthier but also delicious muffin, is we're kind of looking for a couple of things. We want to check the added sugar content. Can we add some sweetness using fruit? And then we can cut back a little bit on the added sugar, which is what is going on here, because we're getting a little bit of sweetness from that applesauce, and we're also going to get some sweetness from other fruit that we're going to add a little bit later here. And then, are you using whole grains? Can you swap out some of the refined flour that maybe the recipe calls for a whole grain? And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then also, what kind of fat is the recipe calling for? Yes, it's fine to use butter once in a while, but if you're on a cardiovascular healthy journey, then we want to try to keep saturated fat as low as possible. And we know that butter just kind of adds that. So using a plant-based oil, whether it's olive oil or whether it's canola oil, can help significantly keep that saturated fat content lower. And oils tend to also keep baked goods a little bit. It keeps them from getting so dry. They'll get a little drier when you use butter, or with oils, they tend to stay a little bit more moist. Okay, so here we got this going. So here we've got our wet ingredients in here. Now we're just going to go ahead and add our dry ingredients. And basically, I'm using, and we'll talk about this here in a sec, so I'm using 100% whole wheat flour. So 100% whole wheat flour, in my opinion, and I think most would agree, it is a little bit heavier wheat flavor. I'm just having a real hard time right now finding 100% whole wheat but white flour. So it's basically whole wheat flour, but it's a different type of wheat grain, and it's a little lighter in flavor. I'm having a harder time finding the white whole wheat, and I'm also having a harder time finding whole wheat pastry flour. That's what this recipe originally called for. It was 100% whole wheat pastry flour. And because of that, because I can't find it, I'm just using 100% whole wheat flour, and that's fine. The only difference that I changed was that I did change the amount of water. So originally the water, I think it was 2/3 of a cup of boiling water that you're adding to your oats. I upped it to closer to a cup because the 100% whole wheat flour, I feel, just absorbs a little bit more of the liquid than even the more refined, like the finer grained, like whole wheat pastry flour. So anyway, I just upped the liquid a little bit. All right, so this is calling for 2 cups. It's about 250 grams. So normally when I'm baking, I do weigh. I think when it comes to flour, because it makes a big difference. So if you're not weighing your flour and baked goods, I would highly suggest you do that because it does vary a lot. I keep my whole wheat flour in my freezer just to keep it fresher, and you know, very cold flour is going to measure differently than flour that you might keep in your pantry. I'm not doing that today, but typically I do really like to weigh the flour when I'm baking. I think you just get better results. Okay, now we're gonna do our leavener. And because this is actually a vegan recipe, I don't know that it was originally designed that way. I forget where I came across this recipe. I sort of modified it a little bit over the years. But so we're doing 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And then we're gonna do, I think it's a teaspoon of baking soda. So that's our leavening. Sometimes, you know, again, eggs, when you're adding eggs to a recipe, and again, nothing wrong with eggs, they're fine. But if you are vegan, you're not using eggs, or you might be using a chia egg. This leavening is really coming from the baking powder and the baking soda, so we don't have eggs in here to rely on. And then we're gonna, I forgot to drop this off. So then we need about 1/2 teaspoon of salt in here. And then we're gonna add just some spices, and this is where we're gonna do just a little cinnamon and ginger. I'm gonna do a teaspoon of cinnamon, and I'm gonna do about 1/2 teaspoon of ginger. You can vary this a little bit. And we'll talk about the fruit that we're adding, because although I'm calling this sort of a summer muffin, it originally called for dried fruit, and I do love it in dried fruit. And I'll show you the finished version here in a minute, where I used dried plums, which are prunes. I love that. It's probably my favorite way to make these muffins, but because I already had some of them made is using the prunes, I was thinking, and because it's summer, why not use a different fruit? So we're going to use some chopped nectarines in this. But anyway, so there's our dry ingredients. I think we got them all in. So now it's just a matter of sort of mixing them around as best you can so that you incorporate the baking powder and baking soda and everything in with it. And again, with any muffin, you really just want to be careful not to overmix, obviously, because that just keeps them a little bit more tender. And just to kind of begin to incorporate the flour in with our wet ingredients. Now, what's really different about this batter, which kind of surprised me when I first made it, is it is a pretty thick batter. I'm used to my muffin batters being a little thinner, and I wasn't sure that it would work because it was so thick. But it does, you know, it does. It doesn't get dry. It's definitely a very hearty muffin. And I was just talking to my daughter-in-law and son, and my grandson are staying with us for a little bit. And she's actually a physician down at Penn, and she said, I was getting so hungry between like patients, and she was taking these muffins with her, and she said they're perfect because they're not overly sweet, but they're just sweet enough, and they're whole grain and they're hearty, and it really kind of helped bridge her from, you know, like a breakfast to a lunch. And my grandson loves them too, so he's been snacking on them or having them for breakfast. All right, so that's enough of the stirring. Now we're going to add just a little over a cup of some chopped nectarines. Now I do love adding, like I said, I love dried plums, which is what a prune is. Some of us don't love that name when it comes to prunes. We sort of think of, is it just because, you know, we're having a little bit of problems in the bathroom. So dried plums, they're awesome. They're way better than raisins. I wouldn't use raisins in this. I feel like unless you soak them and hydrate them, you don't want something that's too dry of a fruit. I feel like this is already on the drier side as far as the batter. So I would do dried plums or prunes, chopped up. I just use scissors and kind of cut them up, and or even figs would be great. Dates would be nice in here. And I think if you have a really nice soft dried apricot, that chopped up would be good. So if you want to go dried fruit route, which is great, these are great muffins all year round, that's fine. If you wanted to do more fresh fruit, the other way I've made these is with some chopped or even shredded apples. I love that. So that's a kind of nice little fall one. But if you wanted to add, you could add blueberries to this. You just have to be kind of gentle with the stirring because this is a rather thick batter. you know, if you don't want them, you know, breaking them up. So, all right, so I'm just gonna gently kind of toss those in, and you can see, if you're a muffin maker, you can see that this is a fairly dense batter, but it really does work. So it makes 12 muffins. So let's just, let me just move this out of the way so you can see. So I'm just gonna take it, because I wanna show you, it's about, you're probably gonna use about a quarter of a cup of the batter, give or take, in your muffin tin. So just be sure you're kind of capturing some of the, you know, a little bit of the nectarines of every, or peaches, or like I said, you could do, if you wanted to, you could probably do blueberries. I have not. I usually make these with dried plums or apples, but I don't see why you couldn't. All right. So anyway, you're going to just go through and do that, and you know, we're going to fill our muffin tins. But the other thing that I love to do, just to make them kind of extra special, I do use the sugar in the raw, or demerara sugar, the coarser grain sugar. And then I'll just take a little bit sometimes in my hand. That's what it looks like. All right. And then just sprinkle. And then I just kind of give that a little sprinkle on top. It just gives it a nice little crunch, just a little added sweetness and something kind of a little special. All right. And so then you'll fill this up, and then these go in a 375-degree oven. They're done in probably 15 to 18 minutes. You know, just kind of check them. And let me show you the finished ones. So here they are. These are the ones that I made that were made with the dried plums. And then this one's kind of cut. Well, this one is it's like, oh, where'd the plum go? I mean, the dried prunes. But yeah, you want them kind of filled with, you know, you want little nuggets of the dried plums or prunes throughout it. And they are really, they're just a nice muffin. They're not dry, but they're, I kind of say, when I want to say a hearty muffin, because they're nice. They just really are great for breakfast or a between meal snack, which is typically the way I tend to use my muffins. They're really good. And they're just sweet enough. Like, they're not too sweet. And they're definitely not a cupcake. A cupcake in disguise, which most muffins are if you're buying them out. So anyway, here's our muffin. So give it a try. I think you'll really, really like it. We're going to do another muffin next week. It's going to be using buckwheat flour, which I think is something most of us probably aren't. We're not using it, and I think we kind of should. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to do another muffin. I love having muffins in my freezer this time of the year. So then I turn your oven on once, double the batch, freeze them. Then you have them for you can just pull them and you pop them in the microwave and you're good to go. So I love just having these around as a great little treat, between meal treat. All right, again, Judy Matusky with Athens Nutrition. Reach out. We are a virtual telehealth nutrition practice that specializes for women over 50. So if you're in that age group and you just feel like you might need a little bit of a nutrition tune-up, give us a shout. Stay well until next week. Bye-bye.